Mike, are you ready for your 10 questions?
I am ready for my 10 questions.
Outstanding. Here it comes. Question number 1. If you had to choose between the two, which one would you pick? Batman's utility belt or a fanny pack?
Not prepared for that question at all. I guess Batman's utility belt.
That sounds like you might be a little bit on the fence. Could I persuade you by suggesting that Batman's utility belt is only available in black, yellow, or gray, but the fanny pack, Mike, the fanny pack comes in whatever color you want?
Nah, I think I'm still going with the utility belt.
Okay, you're going with the utility belt, but would it change your mind to know that The Rock is a fanny pack guy?
No, but I am beginning to wonder if you were telling the truth when you said there was no right or wrong answers to these questions.
There is no right or wrong answer. You just sounded like you were on the fence, so I was wondering if I could push you one way or the other.
No, I think I'm just going to go with the utility belt. And I will say I don't have strong feelings either way.
I'm going to go there, but, it's where I'm at today. That's what you're saying?
Right. That's where I'm at today.
Okay, fair enough. Question number 2. What is your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is Gandhi.
Ooh, what makes Gandhi your favorite movie?
Because as a historical person, first of all, I think like Ben Kingsley's performance is great. My mother grew up in a church that had a lot of Indian spirituality in it. I believe in the transformative power of love and nonviolence. And it was a movie I saw, like my high school, they actually rented out the whole theater and my whole high school went and saw this movie. And it was just a movie that changed, my life. It was wonderful. And so, yeah. Now, my second favorite movie is The Blues Brothers, so don't think I'm that deep. So.
Wait, so you're telling me it goes Gandhi, then Blues Brothers?
And The Blues Brothers, yep.
Wait, so Blues Brothers or Blues Brothers 2000?
Oh, no. I've never actually even seen that. I couldn't bear myself to watch the Blues Brothers 2000.
That doesn't count. That doesn't even exist.
No. The original Belushi-Aykroyd Blues Brothers.
That's great. Well, okay, I have other questions, but can you tell me, you said Gandhi changed your life. It had a significant impact. Can you tell me one thing that changed as a result of the movie, or something that you've done as a result of the movie?
Well, and this actually, gets back into, I don't know if as a result of the movie, but I read a bunch of Gandhi. I took Gandhi classes in college. The movie started me down that road to learn about Gandhi, and Gandhi led me into really reading Dr. King more deeply, because Dr. King studied Gandhi. And that led me to really when the Ferguson uprising happened, when I was living in St. Louis, to really understanding the power of nonviolent direct action. And sort of kind of knowing it when I saw it, when I saw some of the young people on the streets of Ferguson, really engaging along the same lines as people like Dr. King and James Lawson and C.P. Vivian that had their roots in Gandhi. And that helped me know that these were the people I needed to line up behind.
When you say that, I think that's incredibly profound. You said, these are the people that I need to line up behind.
Yeah.
That's significant. Significant, worth noting here.
Okay. Yeah.
Only because I know a lot of other white leaders that they see something and they immediately jump in and start to fix or to lead or to direct or organize. And what I hear you saying and what I remember you doing during that time was you didn't come in and lead and organize. You came in to support, and as you just said, to line up behind. That's a big deal. Can you talk a little more about that?
I'd love to, and this isn't the leadership mistake I was going to talk about, but it's another leadership mistake that led me to this, which is when the Ferguson uprising happened, when Michael Brown was murdered. My first reaction was, oh, this is a teachable moment. We have to use this. And I started to do exactly all those things that you said I just wasn't doing. I'd been part of leadership St. Louis, and I was like, we got to organize these things. We can do these teach-ins. We can do all this work. And Reverend Tracy Blackman, who is an amazing, amazing leader. She was pastor of Christ the King UCC Church in Florissant. Now she's the head of Justice and Witness for the whole UCC. Tracy was one of those friends who loved me enough to get in my face. And talk about a transformational moment is, I was trying to organize all this stuff and get her in to do teaching. And she literally looked me in the eyes and said, Mike, you got to stop. It's like, this is your privilege. It's like, you're feeling uncomfortable right now. And you want to do something and fix something because that's you trying to use your power so that you'll feel better because you're doing something. And she said, you got to stop. And she said, you have to sit down in your discomfort. I'll always remember that phrase. She said, all you need to do right now is listen. You need to listen and listen and listen some more. And then when you're done listening, the first thing you need to say is, here's what I'm hearing. Am I getting it right? And it just took me up short. And of course I went through sort of all the embarrassment stuff, immediately when someone does that, but then it's like, wow. Yeah. And so that just meant, I just started following her advice. And it's like, okay, I just need to listen deeply. And as I listened, I realized, and I had some other leaders in the community, like Derek Robinson, who was a Pentecostal bishop there. At one point he came into, we were literally meeting in Tracy's church, and a bunch of us clergy leaders were up on sort of this platform. I mean, it was literally, we were at the high table that Jesus tells us not to be at.
Oh, no.
And he came in and he basically said, what are you all doing here? It's like, you got to get out in the streets. And don't get out there and tell the kids to come into your churches because they haven't been there and they're not coming because you haven't been out there with them. And he said, and don't go out there to lead, go out there to follow, and don't wear your suits, wear your blue jeans. And that was another transformative moment. I can hear Derek's voice in my head saying that, and it was just like, oh crap. And it's like, okay, that's what I need to do. And that's when I started just not just listening, but going out on the street and watching and listening. And that night was the night I met Brittany Farrell and Alexis Templeton, and they changed my life by following their leadership because they're two of the most phenomenal leaders that I think St. Louis has ever known. So, and that's where I learned that, my job as a white leader in these movements is to listen, to learn, to follow, to amplify, and then also to use my power to help center their voices, and also to use the resources that I have access to because of my power and privilege, and use it to fuel the movements that they're leading.
Wow. Well, all right. So I got to ask this other question then, because
great, let's go.
She challenged you. She got in your face. Mm-hmm. She challenged you.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, when somebody gets in their face and challenges them, the response or the reaction is not always to accept the challenge, mm-hmm. to listen and then get self-reflective and then make a change. But somehow you got to that point. Can you tell me how the heck you didn't get defensive and attack her and justify yourself and puff up?
Well, I'm just a great guy, Jeff. No, I mean, no. No.
No. You're right, right. My bad. Okay, next question.
This will actually get to sort of the thing that I'd sort of prepared to talk about today. This wasn't the first time I'd met Tracy. If this was the first time I'd met Tracy and she'd had that reaction, I probably would have gotten defensive. We'd been friends, we'd been partnered, we'd worked together on starting Magdalene St. Louis. We had kind of been through some trench stuff together, and I knew her, and I knew that she loved me. And I knew what she was saying out of love for me, because we had the relationship. And because of that, and Starsky Wilson's another guy. Starsky has said hard things to me, and I know he can do that because we've had that relationship. And Tracy's my sister and Starsky's my brother, and it just is we have that relationship. But if when I'd first met Tracy, she'd said that to me, I think I would have reacted very differently. But it's because we had that relationship, and I knew that it was an act of love of her saying that to me, that it made me just listen to her deeply. And also just it's also, you meet someone and you just know that, okay, this person's the real deal. And you learn that through experience. Yeah. And so it's just I just need to listen to what this person is saying. And so, but it was because of the foundation of relationship that was there, that I was able to hear her.
So when I talk to people about communication, I define communication as the sharing of ideas and understanding. And I say the number one goal in any kind of a communication event is to offer safety. is if there's no safety, then you have all the boundaries and the walls up, and when the walls are up, it's really hard to share, right? Because then things get clouded, they get misunderstood, they get skewed, right? So then the question is, how do we offer safety? And the two pillars that I suggest are value and trust. Letting people know that we value them, that we care about them, not what they're doing, but them as a human being. Yep. And then we show ourselves to be trustworthy, and that comes through relationship. And so what I hear you saying is that because of your relationship with Tracy, you felt like you could trust her, and that you felt like she valued you, and so because of that, she was able to get in your face and get real about something that was uncomfortable, and you were still able to hear it and not immediately put up a wall.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% true.
That's awesome. Well, I wonder where we're going to go with this next question, because that was just about your favorite movie.
That was good.
All right, question number 3, technically speaking. What is your favorite? What's your favorite quote?
Favorite quote. So this is among my favorite quotes, because I'm sure I haven't sat down and thought about it. So the one that jumps to mind is actually I'm like an Aaron Sorkin nut. I love all the stuff that he's done, especially his TV shows, West Wing and Sports Night and stuff like that. And there's a quote from the final episode of Sports Night before the season was canceled, and there was this guy who was this guy named Calvin Traeger, and he was this huge sort of multi-billion-dollar entrepreneur, and he's sort of introducing himself to this person. And it's like the backstory isn't important, but he said, I'm what the world considers an enormously successful person, and I've failed much more than I've succeeded, and whenever I fail, I get my people together and I ask, where are we going? And it starts to get better. And what that reminds me is, generally when I feel crushed, pummeled, stretched, or whatever, a root of that is I'm taking it all on myself and I'm thinking it's all me. And the quicker I can turn that I into a we, the faster it starts to get better. And then you realize that, again, there's nothing that really is failure as long as you use it to strengthen a relationship. So it's that sort of quote from the last episode of Sports Night. I mean, that's probably one of the ones that I remember most often. And then I guess the second one, because I can never, I answer every question with 2, Gandhi, the Blues Brothers, this, is Becca Stevens, who's been she's the founder of Thistle Farms, which is this amazing community of, we tried to do one in St. Louis, Magdalene, St. Louis, of women who are survived sexual abuse, prostitution, violence, and drug abuse. And Becca just says, love is the most powerful force for change in the universe. And Becca says that over and over again. And so those sort of 2 things, the Calvin Traeger thing of turn the I into the we, and then Becca is just, love is the most powerful force for change in the universe. And it's yeah.
Man, I really needed to hear that today. Totally separate from everything else. So
great.
I really appreciate that.
You bet.
That's a great reminder.
I probably needed to hear it myself too, so that was good.
All right. So that kind of leads into the next question number 4. What is the best advice you've ever received?
I hate these questions of best, because it's push the press, am I going to forget something? So I will just okay, I'm going to sort of reframe it into what comes to mind right now is a really, really awesome piece of advice you received.
we can do that. There are no rules for these questions. What is a piece of advice that comes to you immediately that's made an impact significantly in your life, Mike?
When my wife Robin was pregnant with our first child, who ended up being Schrader, I was kind of a youth pastor in a church at St. Michael and St. George in St. Louis. And I met with the youth group, and these were, kids, high school kids. And I said, I had them write down on little pieces of paper, if I were to open these pieces of paper up when my child hits high school, what advice would you have for me 13, 14, 15, 16 years from now? What would you want me to know as a high school student, to remember as a parent? And I don't know, who wrote this. And like the problem was, my intention was actually to do this, and somewhere along the line I lost all those pieces of paper. So I actually didn't. I mean, I was like really like considering to do this, but of course I read them beforehand.
Right.
And I managed to sort of remember, like the one I managed to remember, because I actually tried to apply it as much as I can, and I still do through my kids' lives, is he said, try to remember what it was like for you to be in high school. And remember, it's not the same for me, but that there are ways that it is. And I just thought, wow. And so I just got into this habit that, I've done as a parent, which is, like every morning, and like I sort of have to tag it to something. It's why I'm brushing my teeth in the morning, which I try to do most days. I like whatever age my kid is at, and I have 2 kids now. I try to picture a moment in my life. And like I couldn't start doing this until they were like 4 or 5, because I don't remember what it was like to be 2. Right. But I would start like trying to remember and just get a picture of, not just sort of like a picture, but like feel in my body what it felt like to be that. And it just, and what it cultivated in me as a parent, I hope, is an ability to try to be sensitive to how they are experiencing the world, which is radically different than how I experience the world. And so, I wish I could remember, because I was like reading through, like I still don't know, like I don't know which of these kids wrote that piece, but that was some of the best advice I ever got
from a student,
from a high school student. Yeah.
See, okay. There was a magician named Bruce Divig, and he and I had a conversation back in the early 2000s. And he said, Jeff, it's not about giving the best, being the best juggler, or the best magician, or the best actor, or speaker, or reverend, or banker, fill in the blank. It's about, specifically, it's about showing up to give and receive with your audience. That's it. And this idea that it doesn't matter where I'm at, I have something to give and I have something to receive, whether you're older than me or younger than me or have completely different life experiences or lifestyle, like there's this give and take. I love the fact that piece of advice that came to you from a high school student completely had this huge impact on your life. That's great.
Yeah. I still do it. My kids are 18 and 22
awesome.
now, and I still do it.
Well, let's go back in time to pre-high school. What was your favorite childhood toy?
That's an easy one, because I actually found it in my basement like 3 days ago. A golden teddy bear that I incredibly creatively named Golden Bear.
Oh, that was very creative.
It was very creative. I've always been really creative that way, and so, and this was just sort of this was my constant companion as a small child, was this bear that my dad's from England and my grandparents from England sent it to me. I remember the day that like this package came from England. It was just this bear, probably from Harrods or something like that, and it just became like my favorite thing, and it had its own personality, and I would play with it, and it was just like I don't really, in fact, this is like right before I came on here, like my mom died in October. And my dad's now living with us, and my brother is in Tucson selling the house. It's not the house I grew up in, but it was. And he just texted me a picture of like all this furniture in this house being trucked away because we're donating it all to a charity. And I could see on this truck the dresser that was in my room when I was a kid. And that was really hard to see. And so it's interesting, like you asked that question, and I'm so connected like in this moment to sort of these times when I was a kid, because it's all sort of going back. But that, I just sort of, and it was great because I was like sort of, I'm going through my mom's stuff now, and we're sort of putting some stuff in the basement to deal with later. And I found Golden Bear, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm so glad I still have this and hasn't been eaten by a dog or something.
Man, that's some heavy stuff. I had no idea that you lost your mom in October. I'm sorry, man.
It was hard. It did.
Oh my gosh, man. Okay, we're gonna have to do like 5 rounds of this because this is great.
I'll try to give boring answers from here on out.
Yeah, thank you. Could you be less interesting, please? Oh, man. All right, so, Mike, may I ask you the next question?
You may. This is like this is like a combination of batting practice and therapy. So this is good.
What? Just, yes. Okay, I'll take that. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
How early, or just want me to answer the question whatever way?
Stop being interesting, Mike. Just
stop being
interesting.
The easiest answer to that question is I wanted to either be a sports writer or a sports broadcaster.
Okay, be a little more interesting. So you were like huge into sports, and you're like, yeah, I want to write about that.
Yeah, frankly, it was like I grew up after a certain age, sort of starting with the late 70s. I was just like, I was into sports. I knew enough to know that I was never going to be I had an image in my head that maybe I could be a baseball player because I loved baseball for a while, but then it just sort of my natural ability or inability became just so obvious that wasn't going to happen. And I loved baseball, and I loved listening to Vin Scully do Dodger games on the radio. Yeah. And so my first thought was this, I want to do that. I want to broadcast baseball games. I want to do play-by-play for baseball. I just love it. It was just, and frankly, it was sort of an escape for me as a kid, was to listen to Dodger games. And then I also, but sort of later discovered, wow, I love writing. And that's where I thought, not so much journalism or not so much broadcast, but I want to be a sports writer. And that was actually true until I went to college. That's how I got to Missouri. I went to Mizzou to the journalism school. I was going to be a sports writer. So that stayed with me for quite a while.
And then in the middle of it, you're like, nope, I'm going to be a reverend.
I'm going to be a priest. That's right. So that's
awesome.
Another story, which was not a question you asked me yet, so that's fine. But yeah, no, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster or a sports writer.
Wow. All right, question number 7. What brings you joy?
What brings me joy? I got to tell you, recently that's been hard to find. So we're back into therapy. So I will say something. I think doing creative, collaborative work with people brings me joy.
Yeah.
That's huge. That brings me joy. I'll give sort of the standard answers, like my family, my wife, my kids bring me joy. They're aspects of our life together. Throwing the Frisbee to my dog and watching her jump in the air and catch it, that brings me joy. We've started, how much tape you got? So one of the things that started with this pandemic is one of the things I wanted to do at our church here in Pasadena since I got here is we have all these amazing artists, and every community has amazing artists. We also happen to have a lot of artists who have experience in artistic industries, who've had training and nurturing. And I always wanted to sort of get a whole bunch of these artists and creative people together, people who were interested in their creativity together, and just sort of put them all in one room and see what happened. But the problem was they were all working too hard. They could never do it. And then the pandemic happened and nobody was working. All these actors and directors and musicians and producers and people like that who were in this, because we're LA, were in this congregation. None of them were working. And so I got a couple of them together and said, can we just start, just get a group of people together and just say, we're going to create at the intersection of the values of our church, which are radical inclusion, courageous justice, joyful spirituality, and ethical stewardship, what is happening in the world, and the gifts that God has given us. And it has been the most fun that I get to sit in on these things. And then it also sort of nurtures the creative spirit within me.
Yeah.
And like last night, and we actually were joking last night, we meet online. It's we've actually never met together face to face.
That's awesome.
Because it's been since COVID. And there's some names that you would recognize in these groups, and there's a lot of people that you wouldn't, and it doesn't matter. And it just is, it's an amazingly diverse group of creative people. And I just we have fun, and the ideas, I love the fact that it's an arena where I can come up with an idea and throw it out, toss it out. And what will happen is, and other people do this too, is it will get turned into something with because of the group, 1,000 times like more wonderful than like the original idea. Because that's just sort of the alchemy of group creativity. So like that brings me incredible, like, you know, some of the projects we're working on, I've just like, they started off as sort of this vague idea from someone, and the group has just taken it. And like part of what I said when I started the group, as I said, the church has a history of being both some of the greatest promoters of the arts and the greatest censors of the arts. And so I said, what I need this group to know is, whatever you want to do, you're going to do, and we're going to support it. I need you to be able to explain what you're doing in terms of the values of the community. But like the church, like you can push any envelope you want. And I will have your back doing it. And I'll probably be there with you pushing the envelope. And I just said, like, just make sure that it's out of love. And make sure that it is at the intersection of our values as a community. So like we've just created some amazing stuff. So yeah, that brings me huge joy.
I could see it. When you first said that, I envisioned a room and you shuffling everybody in and everybody sitting around the outside, all socially distanced, and then you walking to the center, setting down a box, and then lifting the box up to reveal a typewriter, and then walking out of the room, and then watching with the video cameras what happens. Yeah. That's great. So
it's wonderful.
Let me flip the script for a second and ask you, what brings you dread?
Having to have a conversation that I know is going to cause someone pain, or that is going to like have them be mad at me. I just like, because I like, I have a high need to be liked, which is a wonderful and a dangerous and a human thing. And it just is, I've just had to, like, we had to do a restructuring in the congregation because of sort of COVID exacerbated economic factors. And we had to cut our budget by 20% to sort of restructure, and we used it to restructure. And there's people whose positions had to be eliminated. And I had to spend an entire day, and I couldn't even be face-to-face with people. It all had to be online, where one by one I met with staff, and the first were the staff whose positions were being eliminated, and then the other were the staff where I got to tell them their position wasn't being eliminated, but their friends had been. Yeah. And so there was this relief and survivor guilt and all this other stuff. And it was such an awful experience. And yet it had to be done well and lovingly. And it was people that I knew, like they were employees who I considered friends and that I really loved. And I knew that this friendship was over as soon as I opened my mouth and told them that. And there's people I basically haven't spoken to since and haven't spoken to me since. And that's hard. And it was part of doing the job, as it had to be done. Yeah. And you do it as lovingly as possible. And we tried to care for people as much as we could in transition processes. But no, that's what I dread. I dread those conversations.
Well, I mean, with how I've experienced you and your heart like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
those are terrible.
So because of that, because of your connection to others, I'm really excited to ask this next question.
Okay.
What do you want to achieve? Or what is something that you want to achieve? What is something that comes to mind right now that you want to achieve that you cannot do on your own?
Well, okay, that's just about everything I want to achieve I can't do on my own, so that's good. That's good. I mean, that's part of the joy of it. So let's think big. And it's something that we're talking about as a congregation right now, which is I want us, since it won't be me achieving it, since you've already said I can't do it by myself, it's not something I'm achieving, it's something we're achieving. My hope, I think it's our hope as a congregation, is to so radically, honestly engage our history with race that we create a model for community transformation that can be used by other communities. and sort of using, like, we look at, I'm an Episcopal priest, and so, for us, reconciliation is actually a sacramental process, and it has 5 steps. The first is self-examination, and that's you just like look and listen and you learn, like really look at yourself and you listen to how other people have experienced you. And then there's confession. There's like, sin is just brokenness. Sin is a failure of relationship. And then you say, okay, this is where we screwed up. 3 most freeing words in the universe is I screwed up. And that's where you name that. And then you have repentance and reparation. And that's where you say, okay, so where do we need to say that we're sorry? And where do we need to repair the damage the best it can be? Because some damage can't be repaired. And then you say, what's amendment of life? And that means, how are we going to live differently based on this? Now that we've told the whole, like my friend Jennifer Baskerville-Burrows says, you got to tell the whole story so you can write a new story. Now that we've told the whole story and we've dealt with the ramifications of that the best we can, and that's always an ongoing process. What's the new story look like? What are we going to do with that? And then you try to live into this image of beloved community. And so, we're just, and it takes years. And so we're just beginning this process around race, and we've claimed this is our generation's work in the church to do this. And it's grounded in the theology that we believe that every single human being is created in God's image, is beloved and good, and that we don't live into that. And it's all the stuff that you were talking about at relationship, about value. And we're actually starting with sort of 2 sort of low-hanging fruit that will be hard enough. And one of them is looking at the stained glass windows in our church, which are only white imagery. And the second is doing a history of the land that we are on, which we are not the original, residents of. And we're just like, right now, all we're concentrating on doing is, and it's going to take a couple of years, is what does it look like to tell the whole story as much as we can. But we want to create, and we're learning from other communities that have done this, but we want to create a model that any community can do, and to show that this transformation is possible, if you do it with love. So that's great.
This is, as you mentioned those 5 steps, it reminds me of this crazy book that I wrote, Blueprint for Value. Habit 45 is pay once, and I wrote it about how we can forgive ourselves and move forward. But the more that I'm looking at ruptures in relationships, the more I see this as not only a way to forgive ourselves, but also as a way to repair relationships with others. And as I listen to you list off those 5 things, I would just like to throw out free to see what you think about this. Up at the top, I break it down by number 1, acknowledging what happened, right? Mm-hmm. Then number 2, owning your part. Number 3, accepting the consequences, right? The fallout of what happened. Then number 4, the reconciliation, which also includes reparations. And then number 5, moving forward together. And that's going to look different. So I'm a huge fan of your 5 steps.
Well, it's not mine.
Great.
It's sort of, that's sort of basic for us, basic church theology. And I will say the other thing that I've learned, and again from Thistle Farms, which is just like, the community of women in Nashville and now sort of all over the place, because one of their spiritual principles is forgive and feel freedom. And one of the things that the women at Thistle Farms have taught me, because these are women who have been, they've been raped as children, they've been abused, they've been sold, they've been arrested and spat out by the criminal justice system, such as it is, 100 times, is that forgiveness, first of all, can only happen on the timetable of the person wounded. It can never be demanded by the person who has wounded them. And in terms of the going forward together, that's really the choice of the person who's been wounded. And sometimes it'll be like, yeah, no, sorry, I can't. And that's okay. Sometimes we can't go forward together. Like I think about this in terms of, I've been working with people, and I sort of preached last Sunday on sort of marriage, and and a piece of it was on divorce, is that sometimes the toxicity in what has happened in a relationship, a married relationship, a friendship, or whatever, it has gotten to the point where there can be some reparation, the wounding can stop, but it also may be a place where it's like, yeah, we got to walk apart. It's just like we can't go forward together, and that's okay. That's okay. We can keep each moving on, but we just can't do it together. And so I think it's got to be, for me, it needs to be okay to not move forward together, to move forward separately, because sometimes that's the reality.
Yeah. Man, so many good things. So let's wrap it up with the last question, number 10.
Great, okay.
We're gonna come in for a landing with this.
Yeah.
What do you hope people say about you after you're gone?
What do I hope people say? He helped me believe I was loved. He helped me trust I was loved.
Mike, that's great. That's some good stuff. I love you, man. Thank you so much for sharing and being you and doing all the stuff that you're doing. You're an inspiration and a voice for good.